Thousands of children come to the United States through the south border every month. They come from places as far as El Salvador and Guatemala, and they undertake this very dangerous journey all the way to the States, escaping the violence and corruption that is consuming their countries. And authorities in the border are really worried because back in 2014, we had a same type of spike where women and children were coming to this country in numbers that they never seen before. We're talking about just in November and October of this year, we had 10,500 kids show up at the border, and authorities are afraid that they won't have the capacity, the manpower to deal with this in the most humane and legal way. It's really sad. We see that in 2014, we had the same situation. A lot of kids were coming here, escaping mainly from the violence. And there's an uptick in violence again. Gang-related violence in El Salvador. They have a homicide rate equal to the times of the Civil War. Things are really nasty. And we see that the moms, they have only two choices. They can see their kids join the gangs and die, or they can advise them that if they have a relative in the United States, try to make it here and try to start a new life in a place where they might be undocumented, but at least they won't be getting involved in gangs.
Yeah, and for the past year or so, you know, the migrant crisis, the refugee crisis in Europe has kind of overshadowed this, and this doesn't get talked about very much. Yeah. But every day, like you said, we see this kind of stuff happening, and it's very sad to say the least. But you know, what it highlights for me more than anything is what we need to do is really try to talk with Mexico and make sure that we cooperate with them more, as opposed to things like Donald Trump and what Ted Cruz are saying, you know, talking about closing off this border, which obviously is obviously something we have to do as well, but it really comes down to cooperating with Mexico and strengthening ties as opposed to cutting ties off and making enemies as opposed to friends, because essentially these people are coming through Mexico, right? They're not skipping over Mexico and coming straight to the US. They have to go through Mexico, so we have to work with Mexico and make sure that they don't get into Mexico in the first place, and if they do, we have the right place to put them.
Exactly, and the top leadership of the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Homeland Security agrees, because they are asking Congress that is negotiating this spending bill to add $400 million more to the $900 that President Obama already requested to deal with this specific situation. Now, there's two parties that are going to benefit the most. One, and it's really, really sad, is the private industrial prisons, because they are the ones running these detention centers for immigrants, and they get paid for each of the beds that get used every day. So the more kids they come, the more they put them in these detention centers. Private prisons are making money. On the other side, we do have the humane side of it, where in the past, in 2014, we did saw a lot of kids just sitting outside of these detention centers at border patrol posts, where they wouldn't know what to do with them. Some of them, you know, were victims of abuse, of negligence, and the government does not want that. Again, going back to your point of how do they need to work together, part of this money is to create a database, a biometric database for Mexico to keep track of those migrants that are already being caught in the south border of Mexico, between Mexico and Central America. And in 2014, one of the reasons they were looking at a decrease of immigration was because Mexico really cranked up security in the south border. And on top of that, we had the data that there's more immigration out of the United States than into the United States coming from Mexico. So what we're seeing is people from Central America is going all through Mexico to come here, escaping from gang violence. And yet we have people saying here, we don't want to spend any money on these kids. Is it okay for Republicans to say, I don't care about those kids, let them show up, knock the door, and is their problem?
They see the same thing about Syrian refugees potentially. You see the same thing on the far right in Europe as well about Syrian refugees and refugees coming from all over the Middle East. But yeah, at the same time, you know, they don't think it through like that. They don't connect on a human level. It's more of a, these people are invading our country. That's how they see it, and they can't think, how bad must it be in these people's countries of origin to the point where the mother is willing to send their smallest child, for example, off by themselves or with their sibling to foreign countries to go by themselves, not knowing what the hell is going to happen to them. Think about how bad it must really be.
You bring the reasons. We have a chart from the United Nations that shows really clearly the reasons why these kids are leaving their country. And if we can see it full screen, we can see the blue bars, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, they divided by origin. And you can see that the people from El Salvador, most of them, they're escaping violence in society. The gang problem has this country divided. It's a really difficult situation. Honduras has a similar problem, but they all agree on one thing. If they have family already residing in the United States, they're most likely to come. Why? Because they see that as a hope. Now, there's a legal way to do it, there's an illegal way to do it, that must be accepted, but these are kids that are trying to find a new future, and I think that we have to be humane about it, and we need to find, like they're trying to do, ways to control this incoming tide of migrants, but at the same time, make sure that this is not creating an imbalance. Immigration experts say that these will be increasing as long as there's inequality and these countries remain as poor, allowing for corruption and violence to reign free.